Because we know what we like. We like money.
We like money. All right. So with that, why don't we? All right. Let's
Oh,
kick
this
this
is
off.
gonna go bad.
This is
I'm gonna
going
get
to
some
be real
haters and
spicy.
on Twitters and stuff. I'm already
I,
liking it.
I might get some cocktails going here. Yeah, we might just do like
Yeah, let's talk to the guys who like money.
cocktail hour with Scott and Don.
Yeah, we like money.
All right, so with that, like let's kick this off. So, hey, welcome to the second episode of Lunch Money with Scott and Edan. I'm Scott Schnaars with Edan Gottlib, and we like money, and that's why we do this podcast. And today, we want to talk about how a great product isn't the end all be all. A great product really is just a ticket to play a game, but it's not the game itself. We got a great question from somebody, and the question is, it's not do you have a great product, right? Like that's a pretty standard, everybody believes that they have a great product, and if you call their baby ugly, they get offended by that. But the question is when you have a great product, how do you turn that product into real business value? And I think that this is something, Adon, that's really important right now because we're in a market where budgets are super tight. Competition is extremely fierce right now. AI is rewriting the rules. So I think that the way that people and organizations define their value and they capture that value has really never been more critical than it is today. Um, and I think that it's really important that we define value. We define value versus business value. So I think like in simple terms, and Adon, you probably have an opinion on this as well. We think about this in simple terms, like value is what your product does. That's the features and the benefits and the outputs that you get out of it. But business value is that tangible impact that the product delivers. This is revenue growth, it's cost savings, it's risk reduction, it's competitive differentiation. So, you know, everybody's talking about AI right now, and I was with a couple of people this morning that are like all in on AI, just like everybody else, right? If you take AI, like the value is going to be like things like automated insights, but the true business value out of that is we save $2 or $3 million by automating our manual analysis. And I hope that people who are watching or listening to this can see the difference in here's value versus true business value. And I'll throw it to you if you've got an opinion on that. And then we can talk about like why true business value matters a lot more today.
Value, it's a big, complex topic, value, and it's been always lingering. And I think you're absolutely right about there's two things. There is why value is important, and I think there is the situation right now that even put more pressure in being able to talk about the value of a product. Um, the the process of buying committees and scrutiny about budgets and spending. And at the end of the day, you got to remember everybody has to answer to somebody else. At the end of the day, puts a lot more pressure.
Yeah.
But we need to have a kind of a value discussion. I was thinking a lot about how do you define value because there's so many kind of variations of it. And I think the most simplified form I could come up with was it's really the ability for you to call out the impact that using your solution will make. And there's spectrum of
Yeah.
what impact is, but if you can call it what the impact is, uh, I think then you have a value or a place to have a conversation about value. But I'm with you.
Yeah.
It's critical. Value is,
Yeah.
why you need value is super important. You can't be successful without it. Today, it's accelerating.
Well, man, I'm a MedPick believer, and I'm, you've been in enough of my QBRs to hear how many times I've hammered people on what are the metrics that we're driving,
Yeah.
right? And metrics is that business value. And I think the reason that true business value matters more today than maybe it did in the past is, if you look around, more and more companies are just being asked to do more with less, right? We're seeing this across, not only our industry in SaaS, but across every organization. Like that they are that middle layer of management, that group of people is now, kind of been truly decimated, right? Where, somebody who might have had, 3 or 4 employees now has 15 employees because they've had to get rid of other layers inside that organization. So you've got all these companies that are asking their employees to do more with less. And at the same time, business leaders and budget owners, they've got to really justify every single cent that they're spending on things. When the second reason why this is so important right now is, we've all heard that stat out of the Challenger sale from, 15 or 20 years ago, and the number is just larger now. Buyers know more about what they want when they come to you than they ever have in the past. So they don't really have time for that kind of that fluffy stuff in the middle there. They don't want that. They want to see, hey, like, how is whatever I'm buying from you going to have a significant impact on my business? Literally within months. Like, you can't just build like, oh, hey, you know what, in the next 5 years, like, something miraculous is going to happen. It has to be like really tangible, 30, 60, 90 days, and they have to be able to get out of the gate with that. And I think that another thing that we're seeing, and it was one of the conversations I had this morning was about like how AI is making it easier to not only launch new companies, but it's just making it so much easier to replicate features. So, what you have, that value versus business value, that value that you had of that widget, that's going to get built by somebody else tomorrow. It's funny. My dad was a studio musician when he was younger, but he would tell the story about like how Eric Clapton used to say, like, you got to get your licks in today because the kid in the front row is going to be able to play what you played tonight first thing tomorrow morning. And it's the same true now with software, because AI can just make that happen so quickly. So while you think you have something really interesting, that interesting feature is going to get cloned by a dozen or more companies in the next 30, 60, 90 days.
Yeah.
So, in SaaS, like, churn isn't just a product problem. Churn is like a business value problem. Like, if you're not providing the ROI to your clients, like, you're completely replaceable in that regard.
Yeah, and this approach or framework that I might bring up here that I've used. You talk about kind of business value, and I like to, as I mentioned earlier, to expand it into impact. And you have to look at it. Well, before I talk about the framework, doubling down on agreeing with you on the fact that today, in order to get into accounts and stay into these accounts, you will have to have more than just product, because product by
Yeah.
itself is very, so everything around it, the wrapper around it, the ability to present, this is my impact, and to connect to what is important to them, and to be able to deliver revenue, how to deliver value in a short amount of time and in a reasonable schedule is very important. But the framework I suggest to, when you look at value in kind of a bigger point of view, you have to think you're playing three different levels on the enterprise play. Right? You got the individuals, you got the teams or the functions, and then you got kind of the company or sometimes for executives. And there's a slightly different value conversation you want to have with each of these layers. So if you think about the individuals, it's very much kind of a very personal type of value that they get, somewhat emotional as well, right? So I'll give an example. We, in one of my past roles, we were selling this quality software that helps you do quality about your manufacturing lines and make sure you don't have a lot of disqualified things. And so it has a lot of things, but for the individuals really that we're selling to, the personal value was very emotional. It was about having control of the process. Not for them, it wasn't about having less defects. It's more about having control. Well, you look at the team level or the function level, this is more about getting stuff done, right? It's about the process and being able to do things and deliver the results. And so you have to look at this. Oh, you'll be able to run the processes, and you're going to have less defects, and that's on the kind of the team level. And on the company level, it's more about the financials that we talked about, saying, you know what, it's 2% of your margin, so I'm going to give you 1% back. And I would argue that you have to have the complete package of all three dimensions of value, and in order to truly have a good value proposition in a discussion when you run a sales process or a sales campaign. And I would even argue further that companies don't take the effort to really map these things out. And so it's left to the individual sellers to figure stuff out, and each do kind of their own things and got a little piece of it. But it's really this: individual need a very personal type of value prop, a very emotional one. The team is more of a functional area, and the company or the executives is kind of more of the financial side.
Well, let's dive into that a little bit more, because I think that you bring up a really interesting point about executive alignment, right? Because you as a sales leader are going to have one definition of value, but as soon as you close that deal and you flip it over the fence to CS, if your CS peer doesn't agree with you on like what your value, like the value metrics that you're bringing to the table as a sales leader, like if the sales and the CS value positions aren't pretty well aligned,
Yep.
like you're going to do all of this work as a seller to bring these deals in, and you're selling all of this value. But as soon as you flip it over the fence and we try to get them live, if that CS team isn't on board with what you pitched, they're not going to get the value, and they're ultimately going to churn. So I want to hear, like, how did you deal with that in your past lives there? Because I think that's a really tricky one.
Yeah, it's a tricky one, and there's different root causes for this. So one would be just, is there a company-wide kind of an alignment of the type of impact and the value you bring, right? What you're describing here comes out with saying, you know what, there wasn't one that being defined, and sales had to go figure one out, and they figured one out that was working, but there's a misalignment because it's CS not necessarily see it the same way, and they think they have a different mission.
Right.
So that's one root cause of like you got to get it elevated, and if you think about the how you build value propositions, it really is a company-wide thing. You have to go and product needs to say, hey, I wrote this feature because it's supposed to do this impact. And product marketing needs to say, oh, it's going to work well in these use cases, in this scenarios, and then sales can execute against it. You got to remember, sales is an execution group. It's not a strategy group. But a lot of times they're left holding the bag, and because the people that bring the revenues to them, they have to figure it out. The second scenario is about just bringing everybody under one roof, right? This is where you see some of the CROs taking on responsibility for customer success, making sure it's across the board, and you have the continuity, and you move away, remove these frictions that exist within companies between teams not being aligned. So you put it kind of in the same function. And the third one is, I think, slightly a more complicated one, which is, again, a little bit of a company-wide, but into our earlier point about, we like money, it's about alignment to the value and revenue that we bring in, and saying, this is the use cases that we solve, and this is kind of what we charge for that, and then everybody understands kind of their task. So I mean, as a CS, like I brought in, the deal came in this way, and this construct means we're going to do this to make that impact. So it's very clear for me what I have to go to, because we're all aligned. Third one is a slightly more complicated one to deploy. I think the first two are easier.
Do you think that becomes like, do organizations solve that by putting a CRO in place that is the person who is going to dictate, here's what value is, and then they can define, here's value at the marketing level, here's value at the sales level, here's value at the delivery level, or does that need to come from the CEO?
So I think the organizational structure is an outcome of when the company doesn't have that. If it's all aligned, then I'm not arguing where the customer success needs to sit. I have my own viewpoint, but it wouldn't matter if it's all aligned. The Uber problem is it needs to be a company-wide. It needs to be very clear. It needs to probably really come and start from the product. If you're a product-centered company, then the product was written to solve a certain problem, a certain use case, and you have to kind of demand from the product people to think it all the way through, and be really the one that are defining the use cases and while we're solving them. And then you have the other functions that help translate it. The organizational structure just helps the execution be a lot smoother, but it shouldn't be the one fixing the fact that there's no alignment. The alignment should come company-wide. You shouldn't be, if certain use cases are the ones that we are very strong in and the product is really successful in and it makes a significant impact, then this is the one where product would like to double down and invest and expand versus think about something different. So it all has to be together. It's a company-wide thing.
So there's two things there. One is an action item for people who happen to be watching or listening to this, and that is, if you are a CEO or a CRO, like, you should define what value is at every level inside of your organization and what that value delivery is. Because if there's that misalignment, ultimately, like, if product thinks value is here and sales thinks value is here, that's a misalignment, and you're not going to be able to sell stuff. If sales thinks value is here and CS thinks value is here, that's a misalignment, and clients aren't going to get live, or they're not going to be happy when they're live. So I think a good action item is to make sure that everybody is aligned on that value scale. The second thing that I picked up there, and we should do a whole episode on this because I agree with you, but you say it very articulately. In 30 seconds or less, like, you often said, sales is an execution group, not a strategy group. And you just said it again here. Like, for our listeners, like, and viewers, like, what do you mean by that? And how can people action on that?
So put a little asterisk before that. There is strategy in sales, right? There's
Of
sales
course,
strategy,
absolutely.
and it's a very sophisticated and complicated. But at the overall scheme of a company, the job of the sales function is to take the product as it was, built and designed to solve certain use cases and connect with the market and help the different customers in the market and prospects to identify that it solves their problem and help them buy it, implement that, and be successful with it. It's connecting these dots between the people with the problems and the solutions to it. And you have to help navigate through that and understand it in their own context and connect the dots and help through the processes of their company and navigating it and getting the teams all together. But it's an execution. Your job is to execute those plays and connect it. And you bring your own things. You need to have the skill sets and the ability to have the conversations and to connect with people and to listen. And there's a lot of stuff going on there that you need to have a very highly skilled persona able to do it and to do it in large and complex scale. But you shouldn't be the one saying, oh, this is probably the value that comes out of this. And if sales is bringing you this feedback, that means that A, you didn't set a direction, or B, this is things that they find in the market of a path of least resistance or a path that they can find out through this, and you should take that as an input by saying good or bad. It doesn't mean, by the way, if sales find a path that is really easy that we should pursue it. That the sales shouldn't be the one directing how our go-to-market strategy goes, because they're supposed to execute what we decide or what the company decides.
Yeah.
This is the strategy. And so I think it's an important distinction because in many, many cases, you just say, oh, I'm going to bring the best sales guy because he's great. And he's going to figure it out. And that's not, it's not fair. It's not good either for them or for you because they will do it in their own way, which could be great way, but could be 3% of the market tap because it's the path that they knew and really drive you around the wrong place. And for them, it's that they have to figure out all these things of why do you even sell this stuff? And they're not the expert of you wrote the product. You are the one that came up with the idea. So yeah, it's really, you should think about it is their job is to execute the direction and the approach and go conquer that market share, go do this. And here's the tools to do it. Here's the ability, and they are just very skilled to do and execute.
Yeah, I mean, kind of going back to the mercenary conversation we were having. Like, you want me to go kill something, I will go kill that thing. Don't tell me how to go kill it, but just like let me go get it done. Unless like you specifically want me to kill it this way, then be very explicit about that. But at the end of the day, like I'm gonna go out and kill something and drag it back to the village.
Yeah, and again, it's the level of specificity you want to go, and different scenarios requires different specification level, but you should be thinking about it. I hire these great sales professionals because I know they will be able to execute what I want really, really well, but I got to tell them where to go and what's the value and who are the people and what is it going to do for their lives versus let them figure it out. It would just shorten your sales process. It would shorten your ability for success. It would shorten even your product go-to-market strategy really, really fast because you'll be all in sync.
Yeah, I love that. Let's go back to value, and I mentioned MEDPIC before. The M in MEDPIC stands for metrics, which is my favorite, and one of my favorite interview questions is what are the two most important letters in MEDPIC? Because you always get different answers, but for me, the two most important are pain and metrics. And the metrics really is that business value. So let's talk about like how do you capture that business value? And I think that the important thing is to start with customer goals, right? If they have a pain, like the question becomes then like how big of a pain is that? So you can ask questions like, hey, what does success look like for you? I'm working with a client right now, and one of their key things is reduction in returns, e-commerce company. So their whole thing is like, we want to drive reduction in returns for our business. So like for them, if they can reduce returns by 10 or 15%, like that's a massive needle mover for them. So, what does success look like for your client? It might be revenue, it might be efficiency, it might be competitive edge, but to define value, you really have to define those customer goals up front. And then as you're doing that, it's so critical that you're not just throwing features at them, like you're talking to them about the metrics that they care about. They're going to bring up like, here's what success looks like. and they're going to talk about it in ARR. They're going to talk about it in returns. They're going to talk about it in time to value or reduced downtime or whatever it might be. Like, you want to make sure that you're speaking that language on there, and then measure it, right? Like there's the classic expression of, if it's, whatever gets measured gets valued. And if you can show ROI early and you can show ROI often, and this goes back to like the whole going live with CS and making sure that value is aligned there. If we can do that with, case studies and dashboards and real data, the more that we can show that value in real time, the faster that deal is going to close, because you're actually showing something that's really valuable right out of the gate. And then, kind of going back to MedPick, if you can embed that into your sales process so that your sales team can become fluent in how to articulate that value, like your customers are you're gonna drive customer success so much faster, and you're gonna drive your deals a lot faster there. But again, you also need the CS team to be able to support that. So I guess the takeaway or the action item there is, like, your goal is not to sell a solution. Your goal is to sell, hey, here's $1 million in new revenue. Here is a 15% reduction in return. Here is a 20 hour per week per person time savings. Here's a huge uplift in operational savings. Anything like that, like when you can start to articulate your solution that way, that becomes so much more valuable to the sales organization, to the salesperson, but it also becomes valuable to the customer. It becomes valuable to CS. It becomes valuable to the team that's managing that after the fact, when you can start seeing that you have this one true North Star, and that is this value that we want to go drive.
Yeah, I'll call it, you want to sell the impact, not the, because value I think has been abused, but I'm
Great way
selling
to
you
say
about
it.
the impact. It's just thinking about it, it's a complicated thing. If you think about it, there's like, if I go back to the framework I talked about earlier, you got the kind of the personal value, you got the functional value, and you got kind of the financial value. I think the
Yeah.
functional value is where most companies put their attention, because it's somewhat the easiest one to measure. Right? You look at the process, you map their process, and you say, hey, I'm going to take these 2 people. You won't need them to press this button because it's automated. And so you could easily kind of build an ROI calculator based on the functional area and to talk about this. Some companies, especially when you start building strategic accounts, also add the financial ones, right? And the financial model is very straightforward. There's 3 things you could do, right? Give you more revenue, reduce your cost, or improve your margins. And you build a whole calculator around that one. And that's kind of giving you the financial discussions. I would argue that these 2 are kind of mandatory, but not sufficient, because if you look at the overall, if you look at it as an executive in a company, everybody, all these different vendors will offer you different pieces of kind of value and ROI and things like that. And you're competing, by the way, more than just against your competitors, and more against even spend in the same category. You could be competing against, well, do we spend money on free gym membership for our employees, or do we do it on this side? So you really raise your level of competition in that matter. And this is where you need the financial kind of, value proposition.
Well, I always think like back to that point. Like, I always think about, remember how our office in Tel Aviv was across the street from Intel?
Yes.
And they had that giant ass billboard on the side of the Intel building there. Like, I'm 100% convinced that like some software sales guy probably lost the deal to some giant ass billboard that got whacked on the side of the building, because they only have so many $100,000 checks that they can write, and they chose to write it for the giant ass billboard on the side of the building.
Yep. So back to your question about how do you measure it, right? So the functional, you measure it, you map the process, you figure out where you make your impact. And the financial one, you get kind of the modeling, very simple, more money, saving cost or converting margins. The trickiest one, and that's why I don't think most people do it, is the figuring the individual one. Because that really requires you to understand the world of each of your constituents, or the players in the equation, and what is important to them. And sometimes the measurables, as I mentioned in my earlier example, this guy was in charge of quality. Really, their value prop, their individual was, if I just have control over it. I know it's going to be chaos. Some things are going to go break, but I feel like there's no control, and it's going to fly off the line. It takes me a long time to figure this stuff out. And until we really delve down and figure out that all these trends, I got the system that gives me these early warnings, and I all of a sudden feel like I have control over the situation. And And if you got this, then you have a complete package. How you do it, you really have to go and understand the world of your people and people that are going to be either using or buying it. And it's all levels, right? That you need to do it. But that would give you the
Yeah.
full kind of package for value. And not many companies do it because it requires to truly go meet the people, understand the people, and understand the world. The others are
Yeah.
easier to map.
Well, and that's probably like a good place to start wrapping this episode of Lunch Money up is having a great product gets you in the room. Like it's
Mandatory,
imperative
yeah.
to have a great product. Proving the true business value of that offering is what's going to keep you there, and what's going to keep you there for the long haul. And I think that the companies that are going to thrive and the salespeople that are really going to thrive in this, very fast changing new economy are going to be, those people and those organizations that align their products and their offerings to the business impact, to use your words, to really quantify it and to relentlessly deliver on that. So I think like the key takeaway here is keep in mind, you're not selling a product, you are selling a result. And if you focus on results more than the bells and whistles in your product, you're going to win every single time.
Yep. And I'll add to that, when you think about results, when you think about impact, when you think about business value, it's the financial side of it, it's the functional side of it, and it's the personal side of it. You need all three to win.
Exactly right. So with that said, that wraps up another episode of Lunch Money with Scott and Edan. We love money. We hope that you can go get some money. So go out and get it.
Go get some money.